Hello, everyone. This is the Tabletalk Podcast, where we bring people together who wouldn't normally meet under normal circumstances to join the conversation on current topics around Emory University's campus and the country. Today, your host is Brennan. He is joined by 3 Emory University students who will be discussing the so-called Emory Bubble. Together, they discuss the concepts, portrayals, and reactions to this university bubble that some students believe we live and operate in. Enjoy.
Hey guys, it's Brennan, your host. Welcome to the Tabletalk Podcast. This week we're talking about the Emory Bubble, and I've got 3 guests with me here today. I guess we'll go around and say your name and what perspective you're hoping to add to the Emory Bubble discussion.
Okay, hi, I'm Melissa. I am a senior in the college, and I guess I would be adding a more critical perspective on the Emory Bubble.
I'm Philip Jovanovich. I'm a sophomore, and I guess I'm providing somewhat of an Atlanta local perspective just because I was born in Atlanta. I've lived here for most of my life.
And I'm Becca. I'm a sophomore in the college, and I guess the perspective I'm providing is that of someone, of a transfer student, of someone who wasn't here their freshman year and just is kind of experiencing everything a year later than a lot of our classmates.
So I guess just right off the bat, I'll keep it simple. What is the Emory Bubble? Like, what does that mean to you when people say that?
What does anyone? For me, what the Emory Bubble has always been is just kind of like the fact that so many Emory students are kind of confined to the campus. They don't really explore Atlanta, and oftentimes when you're at Emory, you don't really feel like you're in Atlanta as much as you're just like at Emory. And that's just something that I've noticed, from living in Atlanta, that, going to Emory has been like a completely different thing almost.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, I think a lot of the time we think of Emory and then Atlanta as kind of 2 different worlds. And you don't always venture out past Emory or like Emory Point or anything like that. You kind of stay in your sphere. So.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think the bubble even transcends outside of college too, because a lot of my friends who attend this college, even when they're in a different city, they're hanging out with their Emory friends, talking to their Emory friends, not really trying to branch out and interact with other people.
Yeah, that's interesting, the idea that the bubble isn't necessarily confined to the space, but I guess more the culture in a way. But so obviously Phil can speak to this but I was just going to ask, how does Atlanta culture differ to Emory? And you guys might be able to speak to it in a more, I guess, a smaller way maybe when you've ventured outside of Emory.
You can really tell that there's not a lot of Atlanta natives at Emory. In my experience, that's just what I've noticed. Just kind of people flooding in from all different places, and, you kind of get this cultural mishmash of a lot of different folks at Emory, which, isn't exactly representative of what Atlanta's like. And, that definitely goes to say with, all the communities in Atlanta, maybe feel more southern, maybe a little bit more diverse than Emory is. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've honestly felt it to be, kind of refreshing when I've hung out with Atlanta locals, because they take you to places that you normally wouldn't go to. I went to East Atlanta and ate some at Holy Taco and went to some coffee shops, and that's completely different than the normal Emory student weekend. So that was really nice.
And I also wanted to ask, what is your hometown culture like compared to Emory's, or for Becca, I guess, your previous school culture?
For me, so I went to Boston University, and I'm also from Boston, and the lifestyle there, it's very, very fast-paced. In terms of just speaking, in terms of walking, in terms of getting things done. And I think it's a lot slower, and I like it that way in Atlanta than it was at BU. And yeah, I think it's just it's just a different pace of life in general. And I think you might also notice that people here tend to be more friendly, I think, than in Boston. They're it's kind of it's a colder climate, but it's also kind of colder people, if you will. So that's just something that I've greatly noticed upon, coming down here.
Yeah.
I was going to say that there's a lot of things that have always been just very Atlanta things. that a lot of Emory students just kind of adopt. Like, for instance, like there's things like, the y'all,
Yeah.
It's such a great word that, people I don't think get to use until they're in Atlanta, and, now they're, you see all these New Yorkers and Long Islanders just being like, y'all. Just like, and, other things like for me, like, late night going to Waffle House has always been like a part of my culture, like in Atlanta, and this is just something that, Emory students have just, happily, taken as a part of their own interest. It's been really cool.
That's super interesting because I grew up in Savannah, so like the y'all thing's even more like it's very southern, more conservative. So to me, Atlanta is a more liberal space than Savannah. So it's interesting to see how that dynamic works for me.
Yeah. I guess going off the political kind of thing, I guess what do you see as the differences between Emory and the surrounding area in Atlanta politically? Because Atlanta, I guess, can also be its own kind of bubble in terms of, at least politically, compared to the rest of Georgia. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience going to a public school in Atlanta, it was kind of like a combination of both like a little bit more southern folks, a little bit more conservative, and like the more like inner city, like liberal people. And, at Emory, being a liberal arts school, obviously you're getting a lot less of that kind of like conservative perspective. So, that would be pretty different than like what Atlanta's really like. I don't know if like Savannah, like how that compares.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. My freshman year here, growing up in a conservative space, I was like kind of bombarded by all this liberal thought, and it like to the point where I thought like everything I knew was wrong, like everything I believed was wrong. So I think that's a little dangerous to like fit into that transition because the Emory bubble is very like strongly like a little like polarizingly liberal in my opinion. So
yeah,
I think that's kind of interesting because I've always considered Boston to be extremely liberal, extremely democratic, and not going to change anytime soon. And then I come here and I do consider Emory to be a very progressive, very liberal institution. But it just, to me, I still feel like I get kind of both ends of the spectrum, unlike when I was at BU, when it's just very, very, very liberal, just all the time, and there's really no room for a different opinion.
Interesting. I also want to ask, do you think this kind of culture is more exclusive to private universities, or do you think public universities experience it the same way?
Well, I mean, I don't have that much of a perspective, on public universities. I haven't really witnessed too much of that, but, I have a lot of friends that go to, like, UGA or, like, Georgia State. And, that also just depends on the school, I feel like. I mean, it's easy to say that a private liberal arts institution is more liberal than a public, Southern school. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it definitely varies.
Yeah. I think probably, like, according to the college size, too, it'd vary. Like, a bigger school, maybe there's more room for, like, many opinions to flow, but, like, in a smaller school, it's very easy to have, like, a collective dominating opinion, I think.
That makes sense. I also wanted to ask, what do you, in your experience, what do people who have not been to Emory think about Emory?
It's pretty funny because when so all my friends back home, and actually most of my town, they go to local state schools, so like the University of Massachusetts or something like that. So I went to BU for a year, and then when I told them I'm going to Emory University in Atlanta, people acted as if not only had they never heard of Emory, but they acted as if Atlanta was this, ghost town that doesn't really exist and stuff like that because they don't venture out of the Northeast. So, and then I come here and I tell them how much I love it and how much of a better college experience I'm now having. And people are still like, they're happy for me obviously, but they're so shocked that there's, real life, however you want to phrase it, down here in the South, and that you can get a good education and you can be happy and you can get a good job and good friends. So I think it's just kind of interesting that the people I know back home just they didn't know what Emory was, and they don't realize that it's such a great school and that Atlanta is a great environment to be in.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Well, I think we kind of all at Emory have an interesting perspective, like you say, about you see both ends of the spectrum because being a small liberal arts university is going to lend itself more towards one culture, but it still exists within the South, and like there's still going to be a lot of students from the South that are going to come here more than, let's say a Northeastern school per se. So I find that interesting, that intersection.
Yeah, I mean, amongst the people that I knew and just like, the way that people talk about it in Atlanta, obviously they know that it's a really good school. But also there's just very, very much a disconnect because, just so few people end up coming here from Atlanta. So, like, everyone knows that it's really good, but, like, a lot of the times, like, if you want to talk about in terms of, like name, brand, like, it doesn't really hold as much clout as, like, some other more popular schools in the area. Mm-hmm. But, like, nonetheless, it's very much regarded as a very good school, and that's pretty much the extent of it. Like, you would never hear people talking about like some sort, like, oh, like that's such an Emory thing. Like, no one's talking about Emory in Atlanta, really. So like that's kind of it's a little sad, because like you kind of hope that within Atlanta, the city that we're in, that people would kind of recognize us more. But that's, I guess it's kind of our fault for not venturing out more.
Yeah.
What about you, also? Do you?
No one really knew about Emory in Savannah either. More so, like, they knew Emory Hospital. They didn't really know Emory had, like, a university attached to it. So they just, like, it's the pre-med, like, mostly pre-med stereotype that
That's
goes on there.
surprising to me because no one back home. There were some people who knew when I would mention and they'd go, oh my gosh, Emory, that's such a great school. But most people had no idea, or they thought I was talking about Emerson, which is in Boston. But I'm surprised people in Atlanta don't give it the credit it deserves.
Georgia in general, yeah. It's interesting.
In Georgia in general, wow.
Yeah, I definitely found people have no idea. I also wanted to ask, do you think that Emory is diverse? I guess you can take that as you like. You can compare that to, I guess, other schools of a similar nature, or just, I guess, in general.
I mean, if you want to compare, well, I was going to say, like, if you were to compare the diversity of Emory to the diversity of Atlanta, then it's not even close, Right. But that being said, Emory is diverse in many different ways because of the fact that people kind of come in from all different places in the U.S. and all different parts of the world, too. But, if you, like, I visit my friends at Georgia State pretty often, and, you could immediately recognize that it's way more accurately representative of Atlanta. You just kind of have, like, more accurate divisions of, like, race and, like, religion that you might not find here. Yeah. But nonetheless, it's still very diverse. So that's why, it depends what you're comparing it to, really.
So at BU, there was 16,000 undergrads, and that gave way to a lot of room for diversity, and I definitely think there was a lot there. And also, I'm Jewish, and I grew up in a town that had maybe 4 Jewish people, so going to BU, I didn't know a lot of Jewish people, and so it's actually very similar to Emory, even though it's on a smaller scale. But I do think that there's definitely a lot. Maybe I don't want to say a lot of diversity because I feel like I would need to have more knowledge about that in order to actually make that statement. But I think that we're on the right track, and I think that it's definitely more diverse than my high school was or my hometown ever was. So, and I think that's a nice thing.
Yeah, I found it interesting that Emory often, I guess, claims diversity, in comparison to a lot of other, like, I guess, quote-unquote, elite private universities. And so, but I don't know, I find it interesting that, like, obviously I'm hearing that from Emory for the most part. So, like, of course they would like to say that. But at the same time, from what I've heard about other people at universities similar, like, I guess, rank-wise to Emory, it does seem to be, I guess, that they're doing a better job of diversity than some other schools. So, who knows? And one thing this was actually happened after I decided on this topic, but I wanted to throw it in that recently our president, Donald Trump, has signed an executive order mandating free speech on college campuses. And I want to know if you guys had, like, heard about this, and I guess what you think of it, or what people's reactions to it have been.
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure how I, like, or what I feel about that, but, like, I guess, just, like, I guess an anecdote is, were you guys on campus when they had, like, the whole, like, the chalk?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, like, I think that's really relevant to this.
Yeah.
Because I remember hearing about that when I was in high school, and that was pretty much the first and only time I heard about Emory doing anything was, like, just, you know, they're like, oh, you know, all these, like, kids are, like, complaining about the chalk, and, like, I don't know. I wasn't there yet, so I can't really speak on what that was like, but maybe you guys have some input on that experience.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, like, the different positions and take on that whole situation. Like, some people were very vocal about it because they felt, like, discriminated against, like, understandably so, and other people were more like, let's not draw attention to it because it is a negative thing, but, like, we shouldn't be, like, publicizing something negative. Maybe we should publicize something more positive. So it was a very interesting, like, climate at Emory during that time.
What is the chalk thing?
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, can I ask that?
Yeah.
Literally no idea.
On a couple of, like, public surfaces, I'm not sure if it was, like, walls or sidewalk, I think it was multiple surfaces, people wrote, like, some, like, Trump propaganda, like, pro-Trump propaganda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Prior to the election?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, so, like, the way that it was reported and, like, the way that, like the story really came out was that, you know, that's the way that I heard it, was just that there was a lot of chalk writing, and then, like, the whole thing was that they were kind of saying, like, oh, all these liberal students are, like, crying about it, and, like, that was, like, the story was that, like, oh, there's all these Emory students that can't go to class because they're afraid because of the chalk writings.
Yeah.
So then there was, like, so it was, like, one of those things that, you know, it was kind of intended to make, you know, liberal students make, like, you know, look like snowflakes, quote unquote. Like, you know, it was kind of, like, used in that way, and that's, like, the only way that I heard that story. So, I mean, I don't really know anything else.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting because this kind of order, I guess, is relevant in that way, because, like, the way that, I think that's the way he's intending it, is, like, you know, we're gonna make sure that there's, you know, conservative views that can be expressed on liberal college campuses, and that, you know, he wants to, I don't know, the whole, I guess, rights use of free speech as, like, I guess it can be problematic. It's basically
yeah, I mean, I feel like if you want to say something, as long as you're not actually, you know, physically harming somebody else, or, you know, it's not something that's like a racist slur or anything like that, it's free game. But at the same time, like, if there's backlash because of that, that's your problem, because you said that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, it's interesting because it's hard to, I guess, what I was getting at is that it's hard to criticize wanting free speech, because it's something that we all agree that there should be free speech, but, you know, I guess commandeering free speech, quote unquote, as a way to, I guess, push your agenda is what I'm worried about with that.
Yeah.
I guess lastly, do you have any criticisms of Emory's culture from your experience, or any recommendations that Emory students could do, I guess, to diversify their opinions?
Yeah, you know, if we're still talking about the Emory Bubble, I think that it's extremely important for Emory students to engage with Atlanta and its community. And I know that it can be really, really difficult because, you know, as a freshman, you can't have a car, and it's really expensive to get around in Atlanta just because of the fact that, you know, you're usually Ubering around, you know. Like, the public transportation is just, like, not the best, or, like, not the most convenient, especially for us, because, like, the truth of the matter is that we're kind of in the suburbs. And whenever, like, an Emory student can, I highly encourage them to actually, like, go and explore the city, you know, in whichever capacity they can, you know, whether that means, you know, going to, you know, concerts, or, like, maybe going to, you know, a Georgia Tech game or Georgia State basketball game, something like that. And just kind of, like, seeing what Atlanta's like. And I think that it would kind of help, bring in a little bit of perspective on how Emory compares to the rest of Atlanta.
Yeah, I think reading. I love to read, but also even if you don't, I think it's a very important thing. And also to just diversify your reading and take advantage of anytime you see, when they send out like the Dooley's report, don't ignore it. Find, they often have different talks or, an famous author coming in or somebody giving a speech on climate change or on racism or sexism in today's world or just something along those lines. I think you should go to those things. Don't automatically just say no. Go to them. Go learn. Enrich yourself.
Yeah. I think my advice is more along the lines of this free speech in the Emory Bubble. I would say that we should take more time to actually listen to each other rather than just make sort of judgments, for lack of a better word, just because someone tends to be associated more on the conservative side than the liberal side. I know I've had many conversations with people where people jump to conclusions just because someone maybe is more conservative than them and don't really understand where they're coming from or understand what opinion they're bringing to the table. So I think it's very important for everyone to listen openly to everyone on campus, all the voices.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the mission of Table Talk, in my opinion, which is a big reason why I joined it. And so I think this question and the discussion around it's something very important to me on the campus, and that's I guess why I joined Table Talk, because I wanted to help that discussion and breaking out of the Emory Bubble a little bit. But thanks for your time. That's all my questions. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.